on whatever you want.
All right. Well, oh, you mean on that? Who is here to? If people could please take their seats, we're going to get the meeting started. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And Marty Riddle, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight? Come forward. Yeah. You forgot.
Excuse me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Yvonne, can we have a roll call?
Councilmember D'Amico?
Yes.
Councilmember Horvath?
Here.
Councilmember Meister?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Duran?
Here.
Mayor Heilman?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Mike, our city attorney, Mike Jenkins, can you give us a report on our closed session agenda?
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight's meeting was called to order at 6 o'clock in this room. There were no public comments on the closed session agenda and no reportable actions taken by the council in closed session tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Now let's move to the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes from staff? Okay. Changes from council, proposed changes from council. Mayor Pro Tem, you're looking at me.
Yes, I've got a few possible. Can we move item 4A, which is the receive the study on housing report, onto consent this evening?
They're actually, they have a little presentation for us.
I know.
So I'd rather
know.
watch it,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Okay.
All right.
How about item 4B, receive the study on homelessness onto consent?
Yes.
I think 4B and 4C, in fact, could both be moved to consent. They're both updates based on our last study session. Councilmember Meister, I think, has some additional direction on 4C, but I don't think it's controversial.
Oh, no, not 4C.
4C, no?
Yeah, we're fine. No additional.
Oh, no addition. So both 4B and 4C can be moved to consent?
How about item 4D, which is the urban design studio item from the city manager? Item 4D?
But that would be fine.
Okay.
Okay.
So 4B, 4C, and 4D can be moved to
And
consent?
finally, how about item 5A, which is the seismic grant program, onto consent?
I have a comment, but I'm fine with that.
Okay. If there's no objection, we can move all of those items to consent. Any other changes, anything pulled from the consent calendar? Okay. If not, then I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as it's been amended.
Moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please push your button. And we have an agenda. Great, thank you. We'll now turn to any adjournment motions. Any adjournment motions?
I have one, Mayor, as is our tradition in the city, to adjourn in honor of military service personnel who were killed since our last meeting. Sergeant Christina M. Schoenecker, age 26.
Other adjournment motions? I would request that we adjourn in memory of Russ Solomon. He was the founder of Tower Records here in the city of West Hollywood. He died recently at the age of 92. If there are no additional adjournment motions, we will now turn to presentations. And we have two presentations. They're both related. And the first presentation is for Women's History Month. So I would like to ask the women from our Women's Advisory Board to come forward. The month of March is recognized as Women's History Month, a time to commemorate and reflect on the many accomplishments of women and the ongoing efforts to achieve equal rights. Thank you. We have celebrated National Women's History Month for 30 years here in the city of West Hollywood, and our Women's Advisory Board works very hard to ensure that we have programming throughout the year that reflects women's diverse achievements. The activities for this year's month include Women's History Month banners, which we're going to see in a moment. They've already begun being displayed on Santa Monica Boulevard. We just had the International Women's Day celebration over the weekend, the 3rd annual Hollywood Now Her Story Awards, the Women in Film Speaker Series, the 23rd annual Women in Leadership Awards and Reception, the 25th anniversary of the Women's Advisory Board, and a digital billboard display on Sunset Strip showcasing women artists. So on behalf of the council, and it's with our great gratitude that we're recognizing National Women's History Month and thanking all of the members of our Women's Advisory Board for their work. So council, come on down and join me, and then we are going to unveil the banners as well.
While they're finishing with the photos, I'll just say a few words about our banners. Uh-oh. Okay. I don't know. Larissa didn't say. Oh, here we go.
So before you start, Karen, the last photograph we took was with the artist who has been doing these banners for us since the banner program began, Jeff Suji. Jeff, thank you so much for your incredible work on these banners. All right, now Karen.
Okay, now we can go. Okay, so I just want to say a few words about why the Women's Advisory Board chose to honor Maxine Waters this year. As the most senior of the 12 black women currently serving in the U.S. Congress, she serves as the U.S. Representative for California's 43rd Congressional District. She was raised by a single mother. She worked in low-wage jobs before getting her bachelor's degree from Cal State LA. Today, she is a mother and a grandmother and a force to be reckoned with. Last summer, during a House Financial Services Committee meeting, Congresswoman Waters questioned U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and received a lot of hot air for answers. At several points, Congresswoman Waters used the phrase, "reclaiming my time," when Mnuchin tried to sidestep her questions. Maxine Waters is an inspiration to all of us, women, people of color, members of the LGBTQ community, people with disabilities, immigrants, people stuck in low-wage jobs, and people facing financial challenges such as getting moved out of their rented apartments due to high rates. She's there for all of us, and she is an inspiration for all of us to reclaim our time. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Amanda Smash Hyde, and I'm Vice Chair of the Women's Advisory Board, and I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our second banner nominee, the Women's March. The Women's March holds such a space in my heart. I promise I'm not going to cry. I promise I'm not going to cry. I had the wonderful privilege of being able to volunteer not once, but twice to the incomparable John Erickson at political staging, and I was able to actually see the women of the Women's March do the incredible work that they do. The way that they work together, the way that they problem solve, the way that they made it possible for all of us in the midst of what happened in 2017 and the tragedy that we all felt to finally feel some hope again, to feel unified, to feel strong, to feel that we weren't alone and that we could challenge anything and conquer anything because we had each other. And not only did they do this once, they did it twice. So I am so honored that we have these two incredible people with us. Well, we got Dina Katz, the co-executive director of Women's March Los Angeles, and John Erickson, programming and government for Women's March Los Angeles. So I would like them to come up and please tell us how awesome you truly are.
Hi, I'm Dina Katz. So proud to have been part of Women's March and part of it, and really honored to run Women's March Los Angeles, where we can brag that Los Angeles was the biggest march, not once but 2 years in a row. So not, in this environment, numbers do count. So, and we see the fight and we see what we're doing and we see that it's working. And we're going to stand with our principles of unity and inclusiveness and making sure nobody in America feels marginalized. So we're going to keep fighting the fight. We're going to fight it in the elections in November, and we'll see you all marching in 2018.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And can we move the banner so at least we can see the audience? Perfect, thank you. Yeah. All right, so we're going to now turn to public comment. The city clerk informs me that we have more than 20 speakers on consent calendar items. We want to get through all of them before we turn to our consent calendar. So I'm going to limit the time to 90 seconds, a minute and a half, rather than the normal 2 minutes, so that we can get through as many as possible. So these are speakers on consent calendar items or items that have now been moved to consent calendar. The first speaker is James Duke Mason, to be followed by Kenny Tashman.
Good evening, Council. Duke Mason, City of West Hollywood. I'm very heartened to see that the city is looking at taking a number of steps as part of an all-encompassing strategy to combat this increasingly critical homelessness problem, and more broadly, the housing affordability crisis. If there's one thing I think we've learned, it's that a piecemeal approach won't work. It requires a comprehensive, holistic approach. I think we all agree that more housing, both temporary and permanent, is the ultimate answer. But the big question, of course, is how do we reach that goal? A first step, of course, is repealing Costa-Hawkins at the state level, and I'm happy that the Council, with item 2V, passed a resolution tonight in support of that action. I'm also excited that the idea of motel conversions is being explored. It's already been tried in WeHo-adjacent areas with great success and effectiveness. Some question whether there are sufficient monetary resources for this sort of idea. But with a combination of help from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, plus the possibility of public-private partnerships, I think there's more than enough in that regard. Lastly, I think a conversation needs to be had in terms of rewriting our zoning codes in certain areas and looking at how we can encourage more transit-oriented housing. And I think, this is a conversation that needs to be carried on and brought forward, but I thank you all for taking the leadership in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Kenny Tashman, to be followed by Roberto Mazariegos. Kenny Tashman. Kenny Tashman. Roberto Mazariegos, to be followed by Lauren on item 2E.
Hello, my name is Roberto Mazariego. So I'm here because I'm a hotel worker. Currently work at the Sportsman's Hotel, but the reason why I'm here is because I live in Hollywood, East Hollywood. So the ordinance that was passed here last week in regards to Airbnb control is the reason why I told my kids that I will have to take some time to come and figure out what's going on. So since it's general comments, right, rent is too high now, so I believe that if we start having more control into this area, right, I think we have the chance to do something like that here. It happened in other cities. I belong to the LA area, so I would like LA to also mirror that. So basically that's it. I just hope that you guys will consider on keeping your commitment on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Lauren, to be followed by Stephanie C.
Good evening and thank you for your time. My name is Lauren and I've been a resident of West Hollywood on and off since the age of 12. I had a very long marriage during which I raised 2 children and did tons of volunteer work, which I still do, and modeled, but at my age, I'm hardly in demand. Automation and ageism has pretty much eliminated me from the job market. I don't know if you've heard the statistics that General Motors at one point had a valuation of $6 billion with 600,000 employees. Facebook has that same valuation with 6,000 employees. Jobs are disappearing. I couldn't even get hired at Target, and I'm summa cum laude from UCLA. Per my divorce decree, I was to receive alimony for life. My ex has been unable to give me a cent for over 5 years. It's been very tough for many of us. And then came Airbnb. I have an extra room and bath in my condo and an additional parking space, though 90% of my guests don't need it. Living alone, I'm quite cautious as to screening potential guests carefully on top of the verification process Airbnb does. And I have met the most wonderful people from all over the world, many of whom will be lifelong friends. Learning and sharing about different cultures, in my humble opinion, especially connecting, is an important step in maintaining peace. I really don't like living alone for many reasons, but if I took a roommate, I'd have no place for my son to stay when he visits from New York a few times a year. Is that my time?
Yes, that's your time.
Okay, thank you so much.
We also got your email as well. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Stephanie C., to be followed by Jason Record.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak this evening. I respectfully request that the council postpone their vote on the short-term rentals and that in order to allow for further deliberation. I live in West Hollywood for over 12 years. I'm a landlord as well, and I have long-term renters. And I think they should be allowed to earn revenue and have their own economic stability. I think that's really important. I don't think you guys have thought that part through. I also believe it's a mistaken assumption that landlords will transform their long-term rentals into short-term rentals. From the outside looking in, it looks like a lot of work to me for the same amount of money. So I think you're making some mistaken assumptions, and I want to remind the council that West Hollywood is one of the most progressive cities in this nation, and this is a representative democracy where you're supposed to represent the views and needs and wants and desires of your constituents. And there's already 1,000 people here, mostly renters, who are doing Airbnb to get that extra revenue for themselves. So let the renters have their economic stability. Thank you.
Jason Record, to be followed by Brad Kiesler.
Good evening, hello. I'm Jason Record, and I'm a resident of West Hollywood. Regarding the current decision of the council forbidding tenants to home share because it takes a room off the rental market, I'm confused and ask you to reconsider, and please let me explain. There are currently home-based businesses in West Hollywood: artists, clothing designers, interior designers, music instructors, tutors, counselors, and many more who utilize a separate room in their residence and have clients visit their home to conduct business. According to West Hollywood Municipal Code 19.36140, home-based businesses, the location of home business section, it states, the home business shall not occupy more than one room of a dwelling unit. So currently, home-based businesses are allowed to use one entire room as a business, therefore taking the room off the rental market. Also, the West Hollywood General Plan 2035 implementation under Land Use and Urban Development, item LUA1 states, the following items should be explored. Expand allowance for home occupations in residential areas. It seems the City of West Hollywood's plan is to expand home-based businesses, yet we are taking a step backwards. Why should current home-based businesses be allowed to take an entire room off the rental market and home-sharing businesses not have the same right? Is this an oversight or a form of discrimination? Thank you.
Thank you. Brad Kiesler, to be followed by Andrea D.
Hi, Brad Kiesler, resident of West Hollywood, and I'm here in support of the renters who are also hosts. The renters who have the okay of their landlord and who are doing it to supplement their income so that they can stay in their apartments. I'm not in favor of those who would abuse it. And maybe one thing you could do is limit it to one listing per host. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Andrea D., to be followed by Lenny D.
Oh, we meet again. Thank you, members of the City Council, for
Can
hearing
you speak right into the mic so everyone can hear
Yeah,
you?
you know,
Thanks.
they say that all the time. Speaking to the mic. Thank you, members of the City Council, for hearing the pros on being an Airbnb host in the shared economy, which is the present and future of income building in California and America. As a rent-controlled tenant, I have been in my building for 22 years. When my mother passed in 2009, I signed a new lease for 25% more money than she paid when she died. I now live in the building 8 years with my two children, 19 and 14. Both attend schools, Santa Monica College and Hollywood High. After several roommates who couldn't pay their share of the rent, I resorted to Airbnb with my landlord's permission. I discovered a whole new experience in quality vetted people from all over the world, a princess from Italy and a World Cup soccer player recently. I rent my master bedroom and en-suite bath. I provide private parking and amenities, including a fridge and a microwave and linens. People come here for different reasons, from business, visiting family, to relocation. I direct all my guests to all our amenities like museums, restaurants, and so forth. I found my children flourish under these circumstances as well. I cannot see how I would have succeeded, or they would have succeeded, had I been evicted and become homeless. I have several other jobs, and I am rebuilding my economic life at 57 years old. I have no savings or credit, and any minimum wage job I would not cover my rent if I worked 3 full-time jobs. This is a one rung on my ladder to success, but it is a substantial enough that losing the potential of renting my spare room would inevitably lead to 3 more people in a homeless situation.
Thank you. Lenny D., to be followed by Jared B. Lenny D. Lenny D. Jared B. Jared B. T. Marie after Jarrett B.
Hello, Council. I'm here on behalf of a West Hollywood resident. She's actually a cancer patient. She's battling cancer, and Airbnb is what is allowing her to create an income, to have a in-home keeper, and things of the like. So it's very expansive what Airbnb does. It allows people to come here also and experience tourism in a way that they wouldn't. I'm a Texas native, and I wouldn't be here if not had rented her home. And then it turned into me actually becoming a bit of a caretaker. And this is actually an economic issue. We're not going to legislate out Airbnb. People will go to Craigslist, and then you'll have less of a vetting system. And you might have, you know, people that you cannot track. But through Airbnb, I managed homes from Chicago. Here, you can supplement your income. People's rent is going to go up for one way or another. Take Uber into account. We are having to share rides. We are having, as citizens, to find means to make incomes because the economy is not there for us. So to take Airbnb away from the woman here and now that I'm representing might mean life and death. And that is just the absolute truth of her situation. I understand it affects other people differently, but here and now, you know, this is who I've come to represent. Her name's Diana Ezra, and she is very much dependent on Airbnb for her well-being.
Thank you. T. Marie. T. Marie. T. Marie. Janet Gagnon, to be followed by Rob Bergstein.
Thank you for pronouncing that correctly. That's rare, so I appreciate it. Janet Gagnon with the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, and we appreciate the City Council bringing forward this issue. The majority of our members are small mom and pop owners. They have 10 or fewer units. They invested in their community. Many of them are retirees, and they did this to stay a part of their community and provide rental housing for others in their community as well. They don't have 401ks or pensions, and many are also immigrant families that have come together multi-generational to create these properties and provide rental housing to people. And we're just requesting that you provide flexibility for multifamily owners to allow their tenants to do some kind of home sharing, provided that they get the prior written permission of the owner before doing so. So we just want to allow the most flexibility for all types of home situations and rentals. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob Bergstein, to be followed by Jennifer Gregg.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. My name is Rob Bergstein, and I'm a resident of the City of West Hollywood. While I'm one of your appointees to the Rent Stabilization Commission, I am not here tonight representing or speaking for the Commission, but just as a city resident and landlord. On item 2V, I'm not sure that we should jump headfirst into supporting a complete appeal of Costa-Hawkins and would ask that we perhaps support a full review of it by our state legislatures with an eye towards some changes and revisions, but not a full repeal. I think that having safe, clean housing is a fundamental right at a rent that you can afford. But what you can afford may not be in the neighborhood or city that you'd like to live in, nor do I think anyone is entitled to do so. I'd ask that we as a city not take this issue lightly and that we approach it with an open mind so that whatever the outcome is, it is fair to tenants and property owners alike. Secondly, the Commission brought an item to the Council a number of months ago asking you to consider further researching and possibly implementing a non-smoking policy for all rent-stabilized units upon new tenancy. What this item was about was protecting the health of our existing and any new non-smoking tenants. The scientific and medical evidence is irrefutable in the significant and potentially deadly impact to non-smokers when secondhand smoke drifts into their homes. And while I have over 30 years clean and sober from drugs and alcohol, if I lived in an apartment and someone moved in next door who smoked marijuana, that would be a threat to my sobriety and I would have to move. It is my hope that you would either direct this issue back to the Rent Stabilization Commission, asking for a subcommittee to meet and work with staff to bring it back for more detailed proposal, or you direct staff to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Gregg, to be followed by Jed Kenslia.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Jennifer Gregg, and I am the Executive Director of the One Archives Foundation. I reside in the city of Los Angeles. The One Archives Foundation is dedicated to telling the accurate and authentic stories of LGBTQ people and history. I want to thank the city of West Hollywood for providing the One Archives Foundation space at the Worley Building for our One Gallery West Hollywood. It is a vital space to showcase exhibitions that educate the general public. The One Archives Foundation is pleased to announce Lost and Found, the inaugural exhibition at the newly renovated One Gallery West Hollywood. While many people believe that HIV/AIDS is no longer a contemporary issue, HIV infection continues to be prevalent in 2018, especially within communities of color. Lost and Found seeks to remember the safer sex activism of the past, calling attention not only to the extraordinary lives that were lost, but to knowledge and resources that have been found, which can again inspire, inform, and educate the public. We thank you for including Lost and Found on tonight's council agenda. The public opening for Lost and Found is on Saturday, March 17th from 5 p.m. until 9 p.m., and the exhibition runs through June 24th, 2018. We look forward to receiving thousands of visitors for this timely exhibition. Thank you.
Thank you. Jed Kenslia, to be followed by Jordan Fine.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for your time. My name is Jed Kensla. I'm the Communications Director for the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. I want to thank you for your serious consideration of consent calendar item number 2V, the resolution in support of the repeal of Costa-Hawkins. I also want to thank the Community and Legislative Affairs Division, John Leonard, Hernan Molina, and Andy Lovano, for putting together a really thoughtful and thorough analysis, and also for their recommendation to adopt. 1995 really was the beginning of the end of affordable housing in California and in West Hollywood and in Los Angeles with the adoption of Costa-Hawkins. There's simply not enough housing being built, low-income housing being built to replace what is being lost every day thanks to Costa-Hawkins. One thing I would urge you all to keep in mind, too, including the previous speaker, is that the repeal of Costa-Hawkins does not restore rent control. That is a crucial distinction. That is something we're being hit already on. So all that does, the repeal of Costa-Hawkins returns control to a body like the city of West Hollywood, like Santa Monica, like Fresno, like Riverside. That's an important distinction to remember. I would urge your adoption of this resolution this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Jordan Fine, to be followed by Alexandra Wayman.
My name is Jordan Fine with Unite Here, the Hotel Workers Union. I'd like to thank the Council of West Hollywood for having the courage to stand up to Airbnb, which is a multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporation. You're really setting a strong precedent for other cities and for the county. I'm here because I'm a Los Angeles resident. Rents are going up very high, and we don't need more units being taken out of housing stock for anybody that lives in Los Angeles County. So I'd like to encourage you all to stay with your ordinance, to stand strong. Usually as the Hotel Workers Union, we're used to having picket lines to fight big corporations and win wages and benefits. So it was interesting to see a picket line here today to support a corporation. And I'd encourage those folks to join us as hotel workers fight for fair wages and benefits in the future.
Thank you. Alexandra Wayman, to be followed by Michael King.
Good evening. My name is Alexandra Wayman, and I'm here to support you in passing your Airbnb legislation. I believe in the true form of home sharing in which people are not displaced for their homes, and West Hollywood is going to set a strong precedent for the regulation of short-term rentals in the city of Los Angeles. Thank you again for continuing to be a leader in LA County and passing this ordinance for its second reading. Thanks.
Thank you. Michael King, to be followed by Fatima Murrieta.
Good evening. Let's see if I can do this in 90 seconds. A few things. A neighbor in the building immediately adjacent to mine puts their puppy on their south-facing balcony each day before leaving for work. The resident closes the sliding door so the puppy can't go in and out. The balcony facing south affords the puppy no shelter from the sun or the elements. The puppy, in solitary confinement, cries constantly. To make matters worse, the neighbor's balcony is only 20 feet from my building. You can imagine what it's like for those of us living in my building with the sound of a crying dog imposed on us every day. I've spoken with code enforcement on a couple of different occasions, and the officers ask me for the apartment number. I don't live in the building, and there's no requirement for signage on the exterior, and the building is locked, so I'd have to break in and trespass to answer his question. Is there a way to improve this process, including perhaps requirements for unit numbers on the exteriors of buildings and balconies? Agenda item 2E, the home sharing. A resident who provides fraudulent information will have their license revoked, and no application is allowed for 6 months. This is what's written in the proposed ordinance. This so-called punishment is likely going to just cause a resident to return to the underground rental market. Fraudulent information is an intentional deception of our city's departments and staff, and instead, I think, should be handled as perjury. Finally, parking on grades, item 2G. The Vehicle Code of California specifies that a driver must curb their wheels when the grade is steeper than 3%. That's a 3-foot rise for every 100 feet forward. Item 2G proposes a change so the grade is 7.5%. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Fatima Murrieta, to be followed by Roxanne Ramirez.
Good evening, Council. My name is Fatima Murrieta. I'm an organizer with Unite Here Local 11. I represent the hotel workers actually in your city, in West Hollywood, in the Hollywood area. Thank you so much for taking a stand. I'm a Mid-City resident, and I myself have suffered from displacement due to the decrease in rental units in the city of Los Angeles. And I thank you so much for having the moral courage to pass this policy, and I hope, please, that you adopt it today. As someone who is fearful for my own family and for the future of our hotel workers who they want to live and work in the same city, you're making it possible for the other leaders in the surrounding cities to take from your leadership today. So thank you.
Thank you, Roxanne Ramirez. Roxanne Ramirez. Okay, to be followed by Fernando Pastore.
Good evening. I'm a worker from the Hyatt Century Plaza Hotel, and I'm so happy that you guys did the correct thing, like workers for us. I represent my coworkers, and at the same time, I'm very proud from you guys to make this decision because I'm a resident from LA, and I was kicked out from LA, and now I'm in Inglewood, because the rent went so high to me. I'm a single mother. I have 3 kids. It's so hard to be surviving, and I'm so glad that you guys did the best decision because you guys will be the model of LA. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. Fernando Pastore, to be followed by Steve Martin.
Good evening, Council. My name is Fernando Pastora. I have been a resident of Koreatown since 1983. I've been working at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel for 6.5 years, and I have plenty of friends in West Hollywood, which are worried because of home sharing. But due to your leadership in passing this policy, I can now go back to my workplace and tell them that West Hollywood is taking a stand to protect renters and against illegal hotels. From the bottom of my heart, with all respect, thank you, and thank you to each and every one of you for passing this policy and for looking out for all of us and for being so fair. God bless you all.
Thank you. Steve Martin, former mayor, former council member. Steve
Martin, West Hollywood. It's almost like history repeating itself, John, because we remember when we were fighting Costa Hawkins, and you were in the forefront of that. And why wouldn't we be opposing it now? It's really important to go back to the future where we can protect people in place, keep people in place. We've had, over the years, we've seen a number of our friends being harassed because they're long-term tenants and landlords want them to get out so they can go up to market. It's not perfect, but given what's going on in today's rental market, I have lots of clients who are being evicted and moved on because of the demand for luxury housing. We really need to take a stance, and I think we're going in the right direction here. Also, I just want to, I think it's great that we're honoring Maxine Waters with the poster. She has been a friend of West Hollywood's and a friend of the gay and lesbian community for way before it became fashionable, and we've been fashionable a long time. I have a very specific memory of Maxine back in 90, 91, when I was president of Stonewall Democratic Club, I went down to South Central to help organize a demonstration against Daryl Gates that was being led by Jesse Jackson. I was probably the only person from the west side of LA, shall we say, down there. And when I introduced myself as being from Stonewall Gay and Lesbian Democratic Club, there was at first a silence, and then there was a lot of catcalls. Suddenly, a presence came up alongside me, and it was Maxine. And she was not happy, but she put her arm around me, and she reminded everybody that we're in a coalition and that our community was part of that coalition, and she stood up in her neighborhood where a lot of people wouldn't. So God bless her.
Thank you. And speaking of the past, our next speaker is Doug Routh, who served on our Rent Stabilization Commission for practically ever from the beginning. So Doug, to be followed by Natalie Showman.
And I think John has been here practically forever, too.
Yeah, well, true.
Urge you to continue the limitations on Airbnbs. This is a community, and if you have people constantly moving in, and it's a community of renters who meet with each other, they talk to each other, and if they're constantly moving in and out, I think it does a lot to destroy that community. There's an intimacy and a friendship, and I think therefore that in addition to the limitations we have on the number of rental units available, that it is not advisable to continue to authorize Airbnbs.
Thank you, Doug. Natalie Showman, to be followed by Kathy Blavis.
Hi there. My name is Natalie Schumann, and I'm here to urge the council to please pass the short-term rental ordinance. In doing so, you'll be setting a very important precedent throughout Southern California in establishing regulations and protections against the overreaching encroachment of Airbnb on the housing market. The ordinance doesn't ban Airbnb, but it places regulations that will do a great deal to stop displacement. So we thank you for your leadership in this important fight to preserve housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Blavis, to be followed by Stephanie Harker.
Good evening, Kathy Blavis, City of West Hollywood. First of all, on 2I, I just wanted to say I'm really happy that the city is moving forward with that. It's also in conjunction with 4C, which was moved to the consent calendar tonight, the homelessness next steps, which brings me to really the major reason I'm here tonight to talk about what's been happening on the east side and the safety, the public safety. And we don't know, I mean, there was a murder on Santa Monica and La Brea. We don't know if any homeless people were involved or not, so I'm not pointing the finger in that direction. I'm just saying there's a problem. It's a big problem. It needs to be addressed. And I'm very concerned. I'm concerned because there's been a lot of talk. I understand the frustration of the Sheriff's Department and the community, but we need more visibility. And along with 4C, homelessness, next steps, we need visibility, and there's something that I have a blurb on. I've mentioned it before, and it may or may not be a solution, but it's a visible presence. It's the Cobans, which they have over at the Grove. It's a standalone little office. We've been begging for years and years to have satellite sheriff stations. I made copies for everyone. Again, this may not be a solution. We need visibility of presence of sheriffs, and something needs to be done about the crime on the east side. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kathy, we will be getting an update on that, the homicide that you mentioned. We will get an update during the city manager's report, so you may want to stay for that. Stephanie Harker, to be followed by Nick Gerber.
Try and get this in my 90 seconds. I too wanted to thank you for approving the MOU to conduct the annual homeless demographic survey. And I'm addressing the issue of rampant crime on the east side of West Hollywood, which is now, oh, did I say Stephanie Harker, City of West Hollywood? Well, you all know that. I'm addressing the issue of rampant crime on the east side of West Hollywood, which is now a crisis. Building 1,000 new luxury apartments with a smattering of inclusionary units did not get rid of the crime or homelessness. In fact, things have gotten worse. Eastsiders witness crimes being committed every day. Crimes committed not by people who are homeless through economic hardship or through no fault of their own. The cold-blooded murder early on Sunday although we don't know if it was homeless or transients, but there is high crime in that area. But it left a pool of a man's lifeblood after he was stabbed to death and died in front of the Dillon Apartments at Santa Monica and La Brea. Neighbors report the crimes committed by transients who live lawless lives in encampments on our streets, currently along Romaine at Fuller and Poinsettia. Yes, patrols have been increased, but that is not working. We need highly increased police presence, including foot patrols and continual arrests, regardless of how soon they will be released or how much paperwork there will be for the following crimes. Loitering every day, loitering, littering with trash, used syringes, used condoms, being drunk and disorderly under the influence of illegal drugs, buying and selling drugs, defecating and urinating in public, indecent exposure, harassment, obstructing the public right-of-way, prostitution, trespassing, theft of bicycles, license plates, mail, breaking and entering, all should be enforced until it is no longer a desirable place to be.
Thank
If one
you.
chooses to be on the streets and
Thank you,
refuses
Stephanie.
services, one should not be allowed to disobey the laws to the detriment of the entire
Thank you.
neighborhood.
Your time has
Thank you.
expired. We will move to Nick Gerber, to be followed by Wendell Jones.
Good evening. My name is Nick Gerber. I'm here tonight to commend you all for your passage of the short-term rental ordinance. I think it's appropriate that you did so in the same month that you're honoring Maxine Waters, someone who has championed working people in all of her decades in office, because this ordinance will ensure that all the bussers and dishwashers and hosts that work in all the restaurants and clubs that I passed on my way here may actually be able to stay in this community. I myself have a rent-controlled apartment. Without that rent control, I would not be able to live where I do. I think in the same way that we regulate rent, we do need to regulate short-term rentals. So I commend you all for taking leadership, and I thank you very much.
Thank you. Wendell Jones, to be followed by Virginia Gillick.
Good evening. The last time I was here, I talked to you about the Genesee tenants whose landlord tortured them for over a year with Airbnb rentals before they Ellis'd the place, and who are now suing Airbnb. What I didn't have time to say was that I talked to people telling me that same story from West Hollywood, from Los Angeles, month in and month out. I've told them in the past, go to the city and make a complaint. They can help you. I didn't realize that there was no enforcement going on anymore. I think that the time has come not to let Airbnb take over the city, but rather to stand up to Airbnb and keep our communities together. Thank you, Lauren, for your statements on community. I appreciated that. And I just wanted to say that it is possible if the Genesee tenants in LA can sue Airbnb, there's no reason that West Hollywood couldn't sue them. They've admitted that they've got $2 million in taxes that would have been collected. They know that is going on illegal right now, and they don't care because they think they can take over this whole damn city, and that's not right. And I'm sorry for getting hysterical. They're changing my meds, but thank you guys for standing up to Airbnb. Good night.
Thank you, Wendell. Virginia Gillick, please, people. Quiet, please. Virginia Gillick, to be followed by Hugo Soto.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Virginia Gillick, and I am a resident of West Hollywood for 29 years. I stand to speak this evening to add my voice and experience to the discussion of problems we are facing on the east side of West Hollywood due to drug dealers, homeless people, encampments, gangs, and you know, I'm very happy to see that the city is taking action, for instance, in 2I and 4C. You know, these are things that we definitely need to know. And I did send a letter this morning, and I heard back from 2 people on the council, and one of them told me that the Sheriff's Department is really interested in working harder on this problem, which is very comforting. And I just thought I would give you a little example of what it's like in my life. My place is an apartment on Vista Street, and it's a soft structure parking building. and it's ungated. And very regularly, I find people in my parking spot, and they are having sex, drinking, falling asleep, eating, changing clothes, leaving condoms. It's really, I just want to say I'm concerned about disease, so thank you.
Thank you. Hugo Soto to be followed by Jorge Seperic.
Good evening, council members. My name is Hugo. I'm an ex-rank and filer from Unite Here. Now I have the pleasure of working for the organization that helped bring respect in my workplace 12 years ago. And I just want to say, I represent the workers at the Jeremy Hotel, which just recently became union, and the Andaz. And let me say that they are thrilled at the courage of this body, the government body, in regulating Airbnb. So on behalf of them, I thank you. And as a renter of Los Feliz, don't have the money to live in West Hollywood, but I live in a nice area in Los Angeles. And you know what? I see the lock boxes are starting to appear in my neighborhood. My neighbors are now rotating. I see different people come around. And I live in a rent-controlled building. And I want to say that the courage that this chamber displayed against these multinational corporations is an example for California, Southern California, and I hope that my city has the same courage in doing this kind of regulation. And I just want to say, look, I think that in the world that we live in, where everything is being corporatized and Trump and his cronies are turning everything into a commodity, I appreciate that this chamber had the wisdom to say, you know what, you can't mess with our housing. That's sacred, that's important, and it must be protected. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Jorge Seperic to be followed by Marco Alcala.
Good evening. My name is Jorge Seperac. I live in West Hollywood since 2000. For me, West Hollywood is not just, many people come to West Hollywood, oh, we're going to go to party. This is my home. I live here. Finally, I find happiness because, I live in different countries and different areas, different neighborhoods. But
Jorge, can you pick up the mic a little bit so we can hear you?
But I never feel so safe like I live here. This is my home. I don't want to change this for anything. I have rent control. If something happens, like I lose my place, I don't think I can afford to move back to this city. We are still having those increasing the prices like we were. Thank you.
Thank you. Marco Alcala to be followed by Amanda Smash Hyde.
Good evening, council members. My name is Marco Alcala. I work at the Former Large Hotel in Studio City. And as you know, I'm a hotel worker. I'm very, blessed that you made this decision on February 21st. So congratulations. And so this will be an example, not just, for California, but nationally. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Amanda Hyde to be followed by Lenny D.
Amanda Smash Hyde, speaking as a private citizen. I am a renter in a rent-controlled unit. I just want to say that Airbnb doesn't care about you. They don't care about you. They don't care about your community. They are not attending our planning commission meetings. They're not attending our rent stabilization meetings. They are not attending the meetings that help with infrastructure and problems in our housing crisis. This is not going to solve our housing crisis. The steps that we've taken, these are the steps we should be taking. We made the absolute right moves. I 100% support it. And I think it's just really awful, bad business practice to send people out and basically admit that they're breaking the law and not care about what happens to them at all. They don't care about our community. They don't care about our housing. And if they did, they'd be taking steps to help problem solve rather than make the situation worse. So thank you.
And Lenny D. Lenny D. is the last speaker on any of the consent calendar items.
Hello, my name is Lenny D. I am a longtime resident of West Hollywood. I seem like one of the rare ones right now. I'm up here to speak in support of home sharing. I think it's a very good option for individuals that live here. I happen to own my home, so I want the flexibility to share it out however I please if I'm not staying there. It's not going to take a unit off of the rental, the number of rental units within the city. I think right now Airbnb is being used a little bit more as a scapegoat, is being targeted as the cause of some problems that it's not a part of. Rents have risen in other areas and other cities within Los Angeles that have complete bans on short-term rentals. Redondo, Santa Monica, Airbnb doesn't exist in those places, and they have very high rents and similar issues that a lot of people are talking about here. And I feel bad for all those situations, but they're not related to Airbnb. I've been here at every meeting. I've tried to voice our side of it, but if we go ahead as a city, as West Hollywood, and we go ahead and stop providing Airbnb as a service, it's going to cut out a lot of money that comes to this city. A lot of tourist dollars that go into jobs that are created here. It's a lot of tax dollars that will be created from all of those people staying in Airbnb, but the second and third order effects of the jobs that happen within the communities that these people take a part of in the small businesses. That's it. Thank you very much.
We do have one more speaker on a consent calendar item, and we need to take them before we can vote on consent, and that's Richard Giesbrecht.
Richard Giesbrecht, City of West Hollywood. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm here in support of 2M, the traffic management item. Traffic in West Hollywood West remains terrifying at times, and the traffic really backs up a lot on our streets and is of great concern to us. Also, I'm here in support of Mr. D'Amico's wishing to draw attention to the alley in the park. I would encourage the council to look at that carefully and to look at all the circumstances of the commercial buildings around the park and how they might affect the experience of Mr. Park user in that park. So the alley really should be a part of the park, and it really wasn't treated as a part of the park, unfortunately, and we've already spent money on that, but those are sunk funds, I guess. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now turn to council member comments and meeting attendance. You want to start? Thank you. Councilmember Meister.
Thank you. I'm going to start with the consent calendar. I'd like to register my no vote to item 2D as in dog. That's the amending Title 19 of the Municipal Code related to standards for R4BC, R3CC zoning districts. On item 2I, the 2018 City of West Hollywood Homeless Demographic Survey, I want to say how supportive I am of that item, and I thank staff for bringing that forward. The Homeless Needs Assessment Study was incredibly informative, and it's good that we continue to do this and keep track of our homeless population and their individual situations in order to be able to figure out how to allocate funds smartly. Item 2K, the community study, I just want to make sure that staff includes in the scope of work that the city gets a set of unweighted data tabs or crosstabs, and if the data ends up being weighted, that we also get crosstabs that are weighted data. So, but for sure, the unweighted data needs to be in the scope of work. Item 2L, the agreement with legal services. I need to abstain on that item as I'm still checking with the FPPC on whether or not I'm allowed to vote on any decisions having to do with 431 La Cienega. Item 2M, Neighborhood Traffic Management Program petition process. I want to thank Council Members D'Amico and Horvath for bringing this forward. The petition process is quite burdensome, and anything we can do to alleviate that burden on our residents is a positive. Item 2N, improvements in the alleyway. I also want to thank Mayor Heilman and Councilmember D'Amico for bringing that forward. And as Richard Giesbrecht mentioned, I wonder if we can add to this item that planning look at just the basic standards that we can hope for from the businesses surrounding the park that would be open to the park, especially in terms of light and sound trespass. And I'm not suggesting that we look at anything that's already under construction and do anything there, but definitely look towards the future because it seems that that is going to be the future. I want 2V, the resolution in support of the Affordable Housing Act ballot initiative. I want to thank staff for bringing this forward. I would like to add a direction, if my colleagues are amenable to it, that our communications department gets out information about this initiative, and maybe it can be up on the website, maybe a link. And also just want to reiterate that this is not, that this gives back local control. It's not necessarily reinstituting rent control, it's just giving back local control so that the local governments can decide. Then item 2X. Item 2X is an item that the mayor and I co-authored on support of federal action on gun control. And the report was finalized before a local March for Our Lives, Every Town for Gun Safety event was planned. In keeping with the city's past support for the LA Women's March and the Resist March, I'd like to ask my colleagues to please consider adding direction to support March for Our Lives and add to the fiscal impact the cost of city line vehicles as shuttles to the Hollywood and Highland Metro Station for our West Hollywood residents who wish to participate. So
Let me ask, is there any objection to that being included in the agenda item?
Yeah, and I have the fiscal impact, so if I would offer the following amendment to, one, authorize the use of the city's name and logo on March for Our Lives promotional materials. Two, direct the communications department to utilize all appropriate communications tools to promote the special City Line X shuttle service, such as the city's website, social media tools, and press release. And three, authorize the Director of Finance and Technology Services to allocate $600 from budgeted funds in the Special Counsel Programs account, number, I have the number, 100-101-00-531-001 for costs associated with the special City Line X service. And
Okay, if there's no objection, that will be part of the agenda item.
we good? Okay.
Hearing no objection, that's part of the item.
Well, let's see how far I can go then.
Don't push it.
So additionally, FedEx says that it's going to continue offering NRA members discounts, says it disagrees with the organization on certain policies but won't end its partnership. I would like to give direction to staff, or at least have council consider giving direction to staff to put FedEx on notice that the city is considering severing its relationship with FedEx and will find a suitable alternative if FedEx continues its support for the NRA and its members. UPS would be a viable option as it is not a sponsor of the NRA and it does not offer a special discount for NRA members. Perhaps this is something to place on an upcoming agenda, or if we can make the determination right now as part of this item, that would be even better.
Why don't we ask staff to bring back an item? There may be other people we contract with that we would want to explore their policies as well. Does that work for people? Okay.
Okay. Item 4D, which was placed on consent, that's the Urban Design and Architecture Studio. I want to thank our city manager for bringing this forward. I think it's really what the city needs as we move forward with development and our capital projects. The only suggestion I would make is that in the last paragraph it says team members will include both existing city staff and on-call architectural urban design consultants. I would change that to may include. I think that it really should depend on the staffing needs that are identified by the new manager and the deputy city manager. So if everyone would consider that change. And then item 5A, the seismic retrofit grants. I would just also add a recommendation to explore creation of a fund within the Housing Trust Fund for emergency situations. In other words, when we had the situation with the boiler going out at West Hollywood Community Housing Corp., it would have been great if we had some emergency funds that we could have taken out from our Housing Trust Fund to move people to hotel rooms or deliver meals to people or provide mobile showers. And I think that that would be a good investment for our community that lives in our affordable housing units.
I think that would likely have to be direction to staff to explore that and bring it back. Okay.
That would be fine. And then lastly, attendance. I attended the information session on the mandatory seismic retrofitting. I attended the Kimpton Hotel ribbon cutting and attended the League of Cities LA County Division General Membership Meeting where Phil Ansel from LA County presented an update on the LA County Homeless Initiative. I attended the Homeless Services Connect Day. More than 60 people who are currently experiencing homelessness were able to connect to a diverse array of service providers, both the city's contracted agencies and our collaborative partners. I want to thank Essentia, Step Up on Second, LA LGBT Center, Tarzana Treatment Centers, A Safe Refuge, Friends Community Center, NCJW, Jewish Family Service, Los Angeles Youth Network, Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, LA County Department of Mental Health, LA County Department of Public Health, PATH Veterans Program, APLA Health, Saban Community Clinic, the People Concern. Lunch for All participated was donated by Kitchen 24, so I want to give them a shout out. And haircuts were donated by Jonathan Van Ness, Melissa Silva, Marion Rogers, and Mark Annawalt. So I want to thank all of these providers and volunteers for participating in that. It was a really successful event, and I hope that we will consider having another Service Connect Day soon. Lastly, just one last thing. I just want to mention that the winter shelters, LASA has put out a press release that the winter shelters have been extended until Saturday, March 31st. LASA, in conjunction with their partners at the City and County of Los Angeles, will be extending their winter shelter program through March 31st. And if you need more information on that, you can either call council offices or check the LASA website. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember D'Amico.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'll start with next week. I'm going to be at the National League of Cities conference in Washington, D.C., and I had a dream that I was in Washington, D.C. when Donald Trump resigned, so fingers crossed. Hope springs eternal. I want to thank everyone who came to speak about the Airbnb item. It's clear that it's going to pass with its second reading, but I still am concerned that we as an organization, as a regulatory body, are leaving a lot of unanswered questions and too much on the table with respect to Airbnb's access to our residents. They have far more access to our residents than we ever will as a government body, and I encourage Airbnb to act responsibly. We know our residents use Airbnb to supplement their income. They certainly don't use Airbnb to torture their neighbors, but sometimes that happens. But I think generally the direction that this body will eventually go, whether it's in 18 months or 24 months or some number of months, will be in the direction of more home sharing in a regulated way. But for now, it's fairly clear that this item will pass, and home sharing in home-owned homes and owned condominiums with agreement by the condominium board will be allowed. So for that, we look forward now to our staff to implement this ordinance and make sure that the rules are followed by everyone. And some of the consent items, additional ones, again, I wanted to talk about item 2M, which is about our traffic management program, and Councilmember Horvath may say something also, but we are really looking at ways to get more traffic management into our community faster. I think part of the staff report is that there will be an online petition, so I'm concerned that the staff may weigh the outcome of this report too heavily towards that instead of more heavily towards putting traffic management in 3 dimensions into our city. So I'm hopeful that both will happen, but that mostly the kinds of traffic management we know we need gets put into place sooner than later. And item 2N, the alley at the park, I want to thank Mayor Heilman for joining me in doing that. It's been a secret passion of mine for 15 years. Our friend, John Chase, always wanted to activate that alley, and it was something we talked about many, many times over many, many years. One of the things we did put into our park plan with the building of the dog parks was a stairway and accessible ramp to the alley, and we know that that is used widely by many people going to the north side of our park and to Santa Monica Boulevard from the parking. And I think as we grow in designing that alleyway adjacent, we'll find it to be a more and more exciting part of our urban landscape. Finally, under our consent items, I wanted to send a heartfelt congratulations to Mike and Christy. They are moving their business to Best in Krieger, and they have served us honorably. And I wanted to send out a times up to Hank Scott. Hank, I read your article in WehoVille about Mike's business and Mike's business and Mike's business, and Christy is a fully half member or more, perhaps. Mike can give us the actual percentage if he wishes of that business. And I think in some way our city needs to check ourselves, because Christy is part of who we are as well. And to have overlooked that so dramatically, Hank, I just want to send you a friendly times up on that. And finally, three final things. 2 of them having to do with the homeless items, 4C and 4D. In item 4C, the next steps in the homelessness response, I had asked in our discussion if we could set up a cold, wet weather shelter at the county site, the metro site, and I was told that that would be looked at, and there's no discussion of that in this. And so, at least as part of the record of that meeting, I think it needs to be in here, and I would hope that Supervisor Kuehl and members of the Metro Board would consider helping us to help our homeless people by telling us what could or could not happen with respect to a cold, wet weather shelter at that location. And given how busy it is there already, I think it would have much less impact than trying to imagine one at the empty church on Fairfax and Fountain, or more homeless gathering by La Brea and Santa Monica. So I think that's an incredibly important piece of this puzzle from my point of view anyway. And finally, on the design studio for item 4D, this has been a passion of mine, our planning efforts and our face in the community of design professionals around the county. I work with them every single day, and mostly I hear good news about the way we conduct business, but there have been some areas where we could move things into a 21st century public-facing platform. And so I think this design studio is really a terrific next step. I want to thank the city manager's office for responding so quickly to our request last week. And I also want to point out that we have begun to institute online submittals and online permitting and online planning applications. And I think hopefully by this time next year, we will have a fully functional design studio that really is public-facing and can get us and get people with aspirations to make the very housing that I think would solve many of these problems in and out of our planning department in as little time with as little hassle as possible. So With that, here's to Donald Trump resigning next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Horvath.
Thank you, Mayor. Since our last council meeting, I represented the city at several Clean Power Alliance meetings, as well as at the LA County Division of the League of California Cities that Councilmember Meister referenced. We were there together. I wanted to let folks know that March 16th through the 18th, our own West Hollywood Sheriff's Booster Club will be hosting their annual Baker to Vegas event. This benefits our local station Booster Club. If you'd like more information, you can certainly contact the station, but it's an exciting event and lots of fun, and certainly benefits the work that keeps all of us safe. I also, next week, will be in Washington, D.C. for the National League of Cities, where I serve on the Human Development Committee, as well as the Women in Municipal Government Constituency Group. I've also been asked to speak on a panel regarding cannabis regulation, which will be interesting to be that close to Attorney General Sessions talking about our proud policy here. I today had the pleasure / sadness / pleasure of participating in a retirement celebration for Michelle Bell. For those of you who have had the joy of working with Michelle at City Hall, I don't need to tell you anything further. You know exactly what I mean. But many people came out, which I thought was a testament to her. I understand her retirement date is before our next council meeting, and so I don't have to spare her coming back to another meeting. I wanted to congratulate her on her retirement, thank her for her many years of service, and for ending it by doing the wobble at Kings Road Park. I wanted to ask staff to take a look at the traffic intersection and related lights around the Holloway and La Cienega intersection, perhaps looking at signal timing, not just of that intersection, but also at Sunset Holloway and Sunset La Cienega. The traffic backs up a lot on Holloway during peak rush hour times, and especially when you're trying to head north on La Cienega and then turn west on Holloway. As people make that left turn, if we don't clear the intersection, it backs up traffic all the way up to Sunset. So if we can just take a look both at perhaps signal timing and enforcement of that intersection so traffic can flow a little bit better during those peak hours, I think it'll make a lot of people happier. I just want to make a few comments about several of our consent agenda items, since it seems consent agenda is most of what we're doing tonight. I first, with item 2.0, want to thank everyone who's making all of our Women's History Month events possible. It's exciting to celebrate this month in our community. There's so much that we're doing, and especially the 25th anniversary of the Women's Advisory Board is very exciting. So I want to thank everyone who makes all of that possible during this month. I want to note my no vote on item 2D. And item 2M, the traffic management item, I want to thank Councilmember D'Amico for inviting me to work on that with him and be able to bring to the conversation also a meeting with Waze. I know that Waze has certainly transformed traffic patterns in our community, and so sitting down to talk with them about what can be done and perhaps working with their algorithm to reroute some of those traffic patterns so we're not experiencing some of the impacts that we hear about routinely is something that I think is worth having a conversation with them about. I know our neighbors in Los Angeles had that conversation with some success. So I look forward to all the ways that we'll be able to handle our traffic management in our various neighborhoods. On item 2E, I want to thank everyone who came out to speak tonight regarding the Airbnb legislation that we discussed at our last meeting. Tonight, we're taking a step not only to protect our rent stabilization ordinance and the units that are protected by it, but also residential quality of life. But while we're doing that, we're also offering the opportunity to home sharing platforms who say they want to be a partner with us in that effort to actually become a partner and help us with enforcement and help us with protecting that quality of life. So while I know that there are some folks who would like to see a complete ban in the city, that's not going to happen, but I think this is a step to that perhaps doesn't make anyone entirely happy, but I think it allows us to start exploring the realities of what can be done with regulation and also protecting those units that provide housing that is affordable for many of our residents. Along those lines, I also am glad to see item 2V to talk about the ballot measure to repeal Costa-Hawkins. It was mentioned in our public comment today that perhaps the legislature could take a look at some other more nuanced approaches to tackling this issue. But the truth is they tried to do that and it wasn't successful. And they've tried to do that several times and it hasn't been successful. That's why this ballot measure is coming forward. And I think there was an opportunity for discussion, there was an opportunity for more nuanced legislation to come through, and there wasn't a willingness on behalf of folks up in Sacramento to get that done, despite the best efforts of our assembly member who led that effort. So I'm glad that the conversation is continuing. I also want to thank everyone who participated in our homeless study at our last council meeting. I think it was a really worthwhile discussion and educated everybody on what we're doing to address the impacts of homelessness in our community. I'm heartened to hear, and I was heartened to hear that we're doing a lot of things that will make an impact to improve the situation, but I was also slightly frustrated to hear that they didn't have many suggestions for us to improve what we're already doing. And so being creative is what we do best. I expect that we'll continue to be creative in our solutions, and I'm glad to see so many of those outlined in item 4C. One thing I did want to add to item 4C is I reached out to council members Rue and Koretz in Los Angeles, as well as council member, soon-to-be Mayor Julian Gold in Beverly Hills to all meet together and talk about some of those border issues, including homelessness and public safety issues, so that way we're all on the same page and we're not just sort of pushing problems back and forth without any sort of coordinated effort. So that is a meeting that we'll be doing together to help address some of those issues. I think the more minds we have working on these issues, the greater the impact we'll have in solving them. And finally, item 4D, the design studio is, I'm very excited to see this happening. This is something we've been talking about for a while, and so I'm glad to see it finally coming to fruition. I want to thank the city manager for coming back so quickly with this proposal. For everyone who I've talked to about the improved design in our urban landscape, I think this is going to go a long way to improvement, and so I'm glad that we're bringing more expertise to our staff to support the good work that's already happening there, and continue to live up to our name as the creative city. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Duran.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a few items to comment on. I don't know if Cleo Smith is here, but if she is somewhere out there, I want to thank Cleo and all the special events staff for the Elton John AIDS Foundation party last night in West Hollywood Park. As usual, it came off without a hitch, and we got a lot of those people in and out of from the Oscars through Elton's performance last night, and they raised a whole lot of money for people with HIV and AIDS all around the world. So thank you, Cleo, and your staff for all the hard work in making that such a great success. I wanted to remind people that the LA Marathon is coming through West Hollywood on March the 18th. That's a Sunday. Those of us that live on one side or the other of San Vicente, which is just about everybody, just be aware that when the marathon starts, you're not going to be able to get on the other side of San Vicente, and so park your car accordingly, because if you're west of San Vicente, that's where you will stay until the marathon is over, and if you're east of San Vicente, that's where you will stay until the marathon is over. So I just wanted to highlight that for people, especially those of us that live along Sunset and San Vicente. I will also be in Washington, D.C. next week, not only for the National League of Cities, but NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, having our annual gala. They will be paying for my trip. NALEO will be paying for my airfare and my room and board. But while I'm there, I'm probably going to join my colleague over here at some of the, at the Donald Trump resignation celebration, in his dream anyway. I want a couple of quick other comments. I don't know if the person from the One Archives is still here that came out and spoke, but you are, thank you. This is a really important thing for, I hope, people of all generations to come and see. It's about the story of the AIDS crisis in America during the 1980s and 90s. Now, as I'm meeting more and more young people around town that were born in the 1980s and 90s who did not eyewitness what happened here in America and what happened, especially here in the city of West Hollywood in Southern California, when we were devastated by the loss of so many, and the way in which we responded with resilience and courage, from the Zelda Rubinstein rubbers posters to the Safer Sex kits to putting a latex condom over Jesse Helms' home in North Carolina to getting arrested in the White House. I mean, everything that we did at a very critical period during the epidemic's early years needs to be remembered and recognized. And I know that this is just part of our ongoing work as we build an AIDS monument here in the city of West Hollywood to honor those we've lost. But I think that this exhibit is one worth seeing to get an understanding of what young LGBT people and our straight allies who are all in our 20s went through in a very difficult period of American history. I wanted to talk just a second about homeless and housing and I guess Airbnb by extension, because it seems to be on everybody's mind tonight, at least at the first part of this meeting. Los Angeles Times is running a very excellent weekly series on homelessness right now, if you're reading it daily. And one of the articles pointed out that only 3 of 88 cities in Los Angeles County actually met their RHNA, Regional Housing Needs Assessment, their RHNA numbers, meaning they actually built the housing that Sacramento recommends that each city and community build. And there were only 3 cities in all of LA County. Beverly Hills, San Fernando, and West Hollywood were the only 3 cities in all of LA County that managed to meet their goals. And the reason I think this is important is if the other 85 cities, including Los Angeles and Long Beach, would take the steps necessary to build the housing that's required across the county, we would go a very long way to solving the homelessness and the housing issue. It's a matter of supply and demand. Limited supply, high demand, high housing cost. And until we increase, the demand is not going to go away. In fact, if anything, the demand continues to grow. So the supply side of the equation has got to meet the demand. And that means building more. And what I always enjoy, I guess, sitting up here is the irony that sometimes occurs from the people who will come out and say, you have to do something to stop the pedestrian fatalities on Fountain. You need to slow traffic down, and the next breath say, but can you do something to get traffic to speed up? Or in this case, you know, can you do something about the homeless crisis in the city of West Hollywood? Just don't build anything. Just don't build any housing. And so the irony that occurs in sometimes people's logic, if the other cities in this county would replicate what we're doing in West Hollywood, which is an inclusionary housing ordinance, meaning that not a smattering, but 20% of all new development be set aside for low income, that's a significant amount of housing. If every other city in this county ensured that 20% of their new housing went to low-income people and low-income families, we wouldn't have people defecating and eating on the streets. And so it's all got to be tied together. I think one of the frustrating things about dealing with homelessness is if you think it's going to be solved in a year or 2 or 3, you're fooling yourself. We got to start thinking about this in terms of a 5-year plan, an 8-year plan, and a 10-year plan to get on top of it. We have 58,000 people in the county of Los Angeles out on the street tonight. That is more than this entire city. And that is the reality. And I understand the frustration people are feeling, but let's not vilify all of the homeless. Some of the homeless have serious mental health issues. Some of the homeless have serious addiction and alcohol and drug issues. Some of the homeless are out of job or single mothers who have left an abusive relationship with their children. And so to paint all the homeless with such a wide brush that they're all bad or to be vilified, I think doesn't do us any good. I think we've got to be a little more methodical about it, a little more thoughtful about it, a little more compassionate about it. And it's tough when the frustration continues to build. But I think in terms of us looking towards the future, instead of thinking it's going to get better a year from now, we need to think realistically about when those Proposition HH funds will be released, you know, when we will be able to build here in the city of West Hollywood, when the other 85 cities will do what it is that we're doing here. And the price that we're all going to have to pay as Angelinos is construction all across the county. of new housing, and we got nowhere to go but up. And that's something people don't want to hear. They don't want to hear about going up. There is nowhere to go but up. And so I hope that as time goes on, if people are serious about resolving the housing crisis in Los Angeles, serious about resolving the homelessness issue in Los Angeles, that there will be some degree of acceptance that there has to be new development, and new development set aside for low-income people and low-income families. Only then, I think, will we get on top of a crisis that is of our own making here in Los Angeles. We've allowed the problem to mushroom over the years. Finally, the last thing I want to say, I want to just note my no vote on item 2E, the Airbnb item. We're not passing a complete ban tonight. We are allowing Airbnb to occur in single-family homes and in condominium buildings. So we've drawn a line. We haven't done a ban. But the people that we are allowing to do Airbnb are people who live in million-dollar homes in West Hollywood and 600,000, 700,000, 800,000 condominiums in the city of West Hollywood. So the very well-off and those who are well-to-do are being allowed to Airbnb their condominiums and their homes. And those who are a bit more vulnerable, down towards the poverty level, are being denied that same option. I understand the issue about effects on housing stock. I've been up here for almost 20 years fighting to increase our housing stock, so I know the issue about housing stock. But I think as time goes on, as this issue continues to evolve, I hope we return to take a look at expanding this option to non-rent controlled apartments. Hopefully that'll be the next incremental step. And eventually figure out a way to make sure that all will be able to make use of home sharing. Airbnb is just one platform. There are many others. To vilify Airbnb means allowing all the other platforms and home sharing to escape unnoticed. And I think that what we're going to see now, I expect in the next 6 months, is an unregulated black market in the city of West Hollywood, one that will be in the shadows. People turning in their neighbors who they think are Airbnb next door, might result in evictions of people in their rent-controlled apartments. And I think we'll see that while we think we may have solved one problem, we may have created others with unintended consequences. So we're not doing a ban. We've moved the line a bit over, and I hope as society continues to evolve and economic sharing continues, whether it's ride sharing, home sharing, other forms of sharing in this new economy, where most of the labor force is not unionized. So with all kudos to the labor unions who are here, labor unions now represent less than 15% of American workers. The other 85% of the working class are struggling and having a hard time making ends meet. And I think we need to be somewhat sensitive to that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I have 5 comments. I want to also thank Cleo Smith and all of the sheriffs and event staff who worked on not just the Elton John event, but also the other major event we had last night at the Lot. A lot of our staff time goes into assisting with that. I also want to thank the residents and businesses that help accommodate those events and put up with the fact that the park is closed and that there are interruptions in traffic. Those events are not just important to the city in terms of raising money for good causes, and I was informed that the Elton John event last night raised $5.9 million for their AIDS Foundation. But it also is very important in terms of our economy and allowing our hotels and our other businesses to thrive when those visitors come in town. So I want to thank everyone for their work on the event. I also wanted to follow up on Rob Bergstein's comments about the Rent Stabilization Commission's recommendation that would allow units to be new rental units to be smoke-free going forward. This has come up several times. It was approved by the commission. I think this needs to be agendized for the council to have a discussion about that, and I would ask that our city manager bring this forward at some point in the near future for us to have a council discussion about what we want to do with it and what next steps there are. I think all of my colleagues are going to be in DC next week for the National League of Cities Conference. I'm staying home, but I am attending a meeting of LA County mayors on Monday, and that is a meeting that is hosted by Mayor Garcetti in Los Angeles. I also have work obligations, so I'm not able to go, but I know that my colleagues will represent us well. My next comment is sort of a suggestion to my colleagues. We have things on the consent calendar because they are routine items that can be approved without discussion. And we have gotten into the habit of leaving things on consent and then talking about them endlessly and thanking each other for those consent calendar items. I would ask that in the future, we really think about, do we need to comment on this consent calendar item? Can we just approve this without comment? I think that will speed up our time and enable us to get to the matters that the public is waiting for to be considered. Having said that, I'm going to violate the suggestion I just made and comment on item 2E. First, I want to thank everyone who came out tonight to speak on this. This is actually not the first time we have considered this matter or heard about this matter. We previously had a complete ban on home sharing. Staff found it to be difficult, if not impossible, to enforce. Staff came to us with a suggestion that if we allowed some limited home sharing, it would be easier for us to enforce because there is a company that will help us track who is using one of the home sharing platforms. As you heard from the comments tonight, there are different viewpoints. There are different viewpoints on the council. Tonight, this is the second reading of an ordinance that we introduced at our last meeting. It has not been pulled from the consent calendar, and that means when we come to voting on our consent calendar, that item will be approved. That ordinance will be introduced in the city, by the City Council. The ordinance does not allow home sharing in any rental unit in the city. It does not allow home sharing in any income restricted unit, such as a Section 8 unit. It does not allow home sharing in any inclusionary unit in the city. It allows home sharing in owner-occupied housing only if the owner is present while the visitor is present. And if it's a condo unit, only if the condo association, the homeowners association, has given approval. I know that some of my colleagues think about this as, quote, the sharing economy, but in my mind, this is really a business. It is a business that is trying to utilize units that are intended to be rental units for long-term residents and is commercializing them. I know that some people spoke about how home sharing has helped them as tenants, and I feel for you and your situations, but I think the better policy for the city is to not allow home sharing in any rental unit, to ensure that those rental units are protected and preserved, and that we do not incentivize landlords or anyone else evicting tenants from long-term rental units in order to turn them over into short-term rental units. So those are my comments. I think we remain divided on the council. So with that, I'm going to turn to the city manager, who is going to give us a report. He's also going to bring up the sheriff to give us some updates on the homicide that occurred this weekend.
Yes, Captain Aloma will come up and give a brief update to the council and the community on the recent homicide in the city of West Hollywood. And he'll also talk about some of the enhanced patrols in the area.
Thank you, Sergio. You've had a long weekend.
Yes, I have. Council, good evening. Thanks for having me up here. Community members, what I want to do is just take you through the timeline, if you will, starting early Sunday morning on the murder that we had in the area of La Brea and Santa Monica. At about 1:15 a.m. early Sunday morning, we received a call at the station of an assault occurring at Santa Monica and La Brea. Deputies responded and found a male victim who was bleeding profusely from his upper torso and an injury he had sustained. The suspect had since fled the area. Paramedics took that victim to the hospital where he was later pronounced deceased from his injuries. Just a quick time, like I said, the call came in at about 1:15 a.m. Sunday morning. About 2:30 a.m. I received a call from the on-duty watch commander advising me that the victim had been pronounced deceased at a local hospital. Later on, about 6:30 a.m., I received a second briefing from the day shift watch commander that our homicide detectives were on scene and conducting their investigation into this incident. Again, later, about 12:30 p.m., I received my official briefing from homicide detectives who had been working the crime scene since about 4 a.m. that morning. All the while, information was changing. Each briefing I received, there was new information and new evidence that had been uncovered by detectives and deputies at the crime scene. Early this morning, about 8:30 this morning, I personally met with Captain Chris Bergner of the Homicide Bureau to receive yet another update. I can tell you, based on all the information I've received from Homicide Bureau regarding this crime, that detectives are very optimistic that this is a solvable case. They're working to identify the suspect. Certainly, I don't want to alarm the community. We are not sure conclusively at this point in time whether or not there was a relationship between the suspect and the victim. In other words, whether or not they knew each other or not. Those are things that detectives are still working on. Again, they are very confident and optimistic that, again, this is a solvable case. Just to talk a little bit about our crime statistics in West Hollywood in general. Last year, 2017, we saw a 20% decrease in aggravated assaults compared to 2016 in West Hollywood. So far, year to date, 2018, we've seen a 33% decrease in aggravated assaults in West Hollywood. That's pretty significant when you look at neighboring jurisdictions as it relates to these types of crimes. So that's good news. Now, concerning for me and for the station is that the suspect is still at large. He or she has not been arrested yet. Like I said, we believe that, and are pretty confident that that will happen. However, what are we doing now moving forward as it relates to the East End? We've increased patrols on the East End. We are augmenting our regular patrol deputies with foot patrols. I met with staff this morning, and we are going to be having our cops team and our entertainment policing team kind of changing their mission and doing more patrols on the East End to include bike patrols and foot beats. Starting just this evening, we directed our training cars, which consist of 2 deputies per car, to do increased patrols of the East End, concentrating on the area between La Brea and Gardner Street, and including residential areas in those areas as well. And they will be doing increased foot patrols. We will be reaching out to our partners at Block by Block to include them in our deployment strategies as it relates to the East End and some of the concerns that residents have in that area and public safety. That's all I have at this time, unless there's any questions.
The identity of the victim, are you able to identify him? Was he a resident of the city, or do you know any information that can be shared publicly?
Yes, the victim has been identified, and his information has been released publicly. He was Bernard Javon Arlane. He's a black male, 32 years of age. He was a resident of the city of Los Angeles. His last known address, it's believed by investigators that he was homeless at the time of the crime.
If there's no objection, I would request that we adjourn in his memory tonight as well. Okay, thank you for that report. Paul?
Also related to the security improvements that we're rolling out in the city, at the next council meeting, we will have an RFP to begin a pilot program for security cameras. The 4 intersections that we're proposing for the cameras will be Santa Monica Boulevard and Robertson, Santa Monica Boulevard and San Vicente, Santa Monica Boulevard and La Cienega, and also Santa Monica Boulevard and La Brea. These will be an added resource. They're not complete systems, so there are going to be gaps, but at least we're going to be exploring the new technologies and ways of creating a safer community. A few other items that came up, the Rent Stabilization Commission's recommendation regarding smoke-free environments. I'll work with staff to bring something back on a future council agenda. Councilmember D'Amico, related to the items on homelessness, the cold weather shelters, they were referenced in general. No locations were specified. We currently have an MOU with the county related to the easement on the bus yard. These are conversations that we are having with Sheila, so we will advance that conversation and make sure that moves forward. On a couple of personnel notes, staff related, as Councilmember Duran mentioned, the marathon will be coming through the city in a couple of weeks, and on behalf of everyone at City Hall, we're going to be cheering on John Kehoe as he runs his 3rd or 4th marathon. He's becoming an elite athlete in his middle age. Also, to echo what Councilmember Horvath referenced earlier today, we did have a wonderful going away party for Michelle Bell. I believe if you're a regular constituent, you at one time contacted her and received just, excellent service, great wit. Someone who understands both the community and the inner workings of City Hall. She was just an amazing asset, and I wish we could just kind of bottle her energy and her service delivery and tap our water. She was just an amazing person. But I'm going to reveal a couple of her secrets. One of her secrets was that someone called her and they were really agitated. She would say, "Excuse me, someone's here, I have to put you on hold for a second." She'd put you on hold and count to 25 to let you cool off, and then she'd pick up the phone again. And if that didn't work, when they asked her for her name, she said she was just a temp employee. And no one ever asked her to spell her name. Yeah, she is loved and she's going to be missed, but she'll be coming back to visit us for lunch and happy hour on frequent occasions. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Lauren had a question.
Yeah, Paul, I had a couple of questions about what we're doing public safety-wise on the east side with this. First of all, why do we have the van? What happened to the van? The mobile unit that was supposed to be the east side, the sheriff's presence.
It was never designed to be the East Side Sheriff's presence. It's a mobile van that is a crisis communication system, and that's rolled out as part of deployment whenever there is an emergency or a public safety incident. Okay. And we do have that. We bought it. We don't have what it used to be like a motor home. We don't have that anymore. We have a smaller unit, but it's technology equipped, and it is deployed for all of our major events and whenever there's a public safety incident.
Well, can we consider using that van? I mean, I think the east side, I know that when that van was, when we had the big to-do about the van coming to West Hollywood, I believe that the east side residents thought that was going to be for them to have some sheriff's presence. And I think that especially now where there's some fear about what's going on the east side, that we should consider utilizing that van.
And I trust the captain to deploy the resources the way he thinks best. Right now, we need black and white vehicles out on the street, and the van is a little bit inconspicuous. It doesn't look like a regular public safety van, but he has the authority to deploy all of our resources the way he thinks they should be deployed. And I don't know if he wants to come up and comment on that, or if I said what needs to be said.
Okay, and while you're coming up, the only other thing I wanted to mention is that I think a lot of us are getting calls from the public saying, when I call the sheriffs, they say that I can't do anything. The council doesn't want us to do this. When it comes to issues having to do with transients and homeless, and I think that we really have to make that distinction between the homeless and transients who there's a criminal element. And I think that, I hope that that's not what's coming out of our, when calls are being made to the sheriff's station. Because I think all of us have said many, many times, we need to become more assertive. I mean, yes, we want to come from a place of compassion, but, we can't continue, just saying, okay, well, they're homeless. It's not only homeless, it's also transients of a criminal element.
Okay, so to answer a couple of those points, I'll start with the van. So the mobile command post, as we've referred to it as, was designed and intended initially as a mobile command post for personnel, deputies, to use in the field for major incidents. Certainly, we can deploy it, as the city manager mentioned, at my discretion, and we can deploy it to the East End as a presence. I actually, in conversations with staff this afternoon, my direction was for those deputies who are engaging in foot patrols down there. Obviously, they have to drive, and they'll be driving their black and whites. I had actually suggested that they park it on the sidewalk near Target so that everyone could see the black and white. And then someone mentioned that that's against the law and we shouldn't park their cars on the sidewalks. But point is that we will be positioning our black and whites where people can see them so that they know that the deputies are present should they be walking somewhere other than that particular area. The mobile command post is something else that we could certainly take a look at and deploy as well. That's not a problem. As far as calls to the station related to homelessness, our COPS team, which is our community-oriented policing and problem-solving team, is doing engagement with our homeless population pretty much every day. In addition to that, calls coming to the station, no one should be told that council has any influence on how we do business as it relates to our policies related to calls for service. If there is a crime that's being reported, as I've mentioned before, regardless of who's committing it, we will respond to those calls for service, absolutely.
Mayor, if I may.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just to follow up, in addition to the mobile command post, there was also past discussion about a public safety office on the east side. I know Councilmember D'Amico and I had sort of led that conversation, and so is there any progress being made with having staff in that office on the east side?
The remodel of the office, and I forget the address, it's the Santa Monica Boulevard property across from Plummer Park. That is in the works and will likely happen in next year's budget, and we will relocate both staff from City Hall and public safety staff there. But from a public safety perspective, the cops need to be in the street. It would be a resource for them to have a satellite facility that if they need to use reports, need to work on a computer, need to use the restroom, it would be a 24-hour facility. But ideally, and the captain can expand on this more than I can and more articulately than I can, the deputies in the field need to be in the field.
Thank you. Thank you, Sergio, for your comments. You're good? Okay, great. We will now move on to the consent calendar finally. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Noting the no votes of Lauren and Lindsay on items 2D and Council members D'Amico and Duran on 2E, and Lauren's abstention on 2L. What is the fiscal impact of the consent calendar as it's been amended tonight?
The fiscal impact with also the addition of an additional $600 to item 2X, given as the direction from council. The expenditures are $209,600, $0 in potential revenue, and $7,420 in waived fees.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and now we can vote. We're waiting for one vote. Okay, it has been approved. Thank you, everyone. The consent calendar is approved. We will now turn to item 4A. And Peter has a presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, City
Mindful
Council
that
members.
some of the council wanted to put this on consent.
This will be brief. I'll just summarize the item and then we'll move into the presentation. So essentially, the City Council requested a review of various strategies to promote additional affordability in the local housing market. The study provided in your agenda packet this evening provides an analysis of 8 strategies. The strategies are arranged by how they achieve their affordability either through reducing costs, rehabilitating older housing, or providing housing for specific
Excuse me, Peter,
populations.
can I ask people to be quiet as you're leaving? Thank you. All right.
Thank you. I appreciate that because the request for this item is to allocate $35,000 in unallocated reserves in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for a consultant to explore feasibility and potential benefits of establishing pilot programs to promote additional housing affordability in West Hollywood based on the strategies presented in the report. Additionally, a second request is to allocate $25,000 from unallocated reserves in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for a consultant to explore an affordable accessory dwelling unit incentive program. So with me this evening, I have Jessica Hitchcock. She is the Vice President of BAE Urban Economics and the primary author of the study in your packet. And Jessica has prepared a brief presentation on the report. So I turn it over to Jessica.
Thank you, Peter. All right, so I'll make this brief. So I'm here today to present on the study we just completed, the approaches for promoting housing affordability. And so last year, the council commissioned a study asking the question, what more can we do to promote housing affordability and accessibility in the city? And as a consultant that works up and down the state and nationally, I commend you for being one of those few cities that does it right. You are one of the first cities with rent stabilization. You have an inclusionary policy in play. People are still asking whether we should do this. And so you're asking the next question of what else can we do? And so in preparing the study, we tried our best to think big for you. And so where this goes is, as I mentioned, the purpose was what other strategies are available to increase housing affordability. And also the RFP contains some questions about housing for special population groups, including artists and seniors. And so in your packet, you should have a nice report that kind of outlines these strategies. And there's a lot more detail in there than I'll probably go in today just to keep it short. But in terms of our roadmap, I'm gonna give you a quick snapshot of housing conditions, which you probably already know, do a quick summary of the case studies, and open it up to questions. So the strategies that we came up with really fell into 3 buckets, I would say. The first is really cost reduction, and that's cost reduction, which means how do we reduce the costs to both renters and homeowners? And also how do we reduce construction costs to kind of bring down the cost for development, and then therefore maybe those costs could be passed on to renters or homeowners. Special populations, we looked at 3 things really related to both seniors and artists. And the last program we evaluated had to do with rehabilitation and looking at how you can incentivize or creative ways to think about how to incentivize homeowners or landlords to improve their buildings. I'm not going to dwell on this slide very long because I think you know all of it. The one things I just point out, just to set the stage, home ownership is not affordable in West Hollywood. The median sales price was $860,000 in 2016, and that was the median, which means 50% are above that number. And in terms of rentals, I think it's important to point out that 93% of the rental units here are subject to the RSO, and that 80% of the city's households are renters. So that's really great that you have that covered. One thing that was a little concerning, and I want to point out, is this next slide, and you already know it, and I'm glad that the Costa-Hawkins issue is on your consent calendar as well, because what this shows is that when units vacate and new renters come in, this shows the average new rent that is charged to that new renter, and in 2016 it's the highest and it's been since Costa-Hawkins has been passed. I also wanted to point out the spread between what an old a tenant who moved out was paying and what the new tenant is paying. And in 2016, the spread between the old rent and the new rent is very high. It's at $468. And what this points out is that Costa-Hawkins is really having an effect, that you're kind of losing, once the tenant moves out, you're losing that unit in terms of affordability. And especially the other thing to look at is new tenants who are moving in oftentimes are facing a cost burden upon initial move-in because the rents are high. And so then where that gets us to is, so what? What can we do? And so for the cost reduction strategies, I'm going to focus more on those today, specifically on community land trusts and limited equity co-ops. So what is a community land trust? Essentially, it's a nonprofit organization that acquires land and holds that land in trust for some sort of public purpose. Oftentimes it's used for open space conservation. And in this case, we wanted to think, okay, is there a way to use a community land trust to somehow acquire buildings in West Hollywood and hold that in trust for preserving affordability in perpetuity? Essentially, is there a way to get around Costa-Hawkins in some way? And we found a good example actually in San Francisco, the Small Sites Program. So the city funds acquisition of existing buildings by nonprofits. To show you how that works, essentially tenants can petition for a nonprofit to purchase the building, and the nonprofits go in and they do an assessment of the households living in that building. And to qualify for the city subsidy, the households have to have an average of 80% AMI. So what that does is that unlike more stringent programs where everyone has to earn 60% of AMI to qualify, for example, on this, you can have some households who may earn more money. They may be higher income households at, say, 120% AMI. And you also might have some tenants living in a building with much lower incomes or on fixed incomes at 30%. And so long as the entire mix of the households in the building have an 80% average, then you can qualify for city funding. So the tenants' rents then go to support paying a first mortgage, and then the balance of the acquisition is comprised of city funding, and the city will give up to $375,000 a unit. In exchange for the city subsidy, there's a covenant that was recorded against the property that says that rent increases are limited even if a unit is vacated. So that's one way that San Francisco has kind of gotten around this Costa-Hawkins issue. And it's also a great preservation strategy in terms of it's a high cost environment too, and it applies, I think, to West Hollywood. Another option is limited equity co-ops, and an LEHC is essentially a cooperative housing model where homeownership can be provided to lower income households. And how it works is that it can serve households between 50 to 120% AMI. And what happens is the cooperative owns the building, and then each occupant owns shares entitling them to occupy a unit within that building. And to kind of highlight how this works is a limited equity, a resident provides a limited amount of equity, say like $10,000. It depends on how this is financed. And then they pay rent like as usual, except that rent isn't really rent. It goes to pay for a blanket mortgage in addition to other operating costs on the building. And then there's some public subsidies that come into play. And the net effect of this is that there are usually restrictions in terms of how much appreciation can happen on those units. So a homeowner who buys in with 10,000 at the end might have, allowed appreciation of a certain set amount, like 5%, 10% over time, and then upon sale, you can have another affordable homeowner who is in need, who is a low-income household, also qualify. And so this is a way to perpetuate homeownership affordability in the long run. Some other things we looked at in terms of cost reduction strategies were micro units, small units. Essentially, it's more of a market-based solution where you're building small 350 square foot units, and in exchange for the small units, someone's paying less in rent. It's not much less, so it's not a great strategy if you're looking at targeting 60% AMI. I mean, this project in San Francisco that we profiled was fairly expensive. The studio, that small studio that you see, was $1,800 per month in rent. So it's not quite affordable, but it's more affordable than the typical studio in San Francisco, which is $2,500. Modular housing is another thing we profiled, which is essentially a technology that's rolling out. It's not that new, but it's kind of being deployed on a massive scale now. Essentially, there's units that are built in a factory that then get shipped out and then get stacked on top of each other. The benefit is that this reduces the time it takes to construct. So if a typical building takes 18 months to construct, this could bring it down to 9. And in reducing time, you achieve cost savings. Unfortunately, the technology is not well tested yet, and so a lot of these projects have yet to see the benefits of the cost and time reductions, but it is definitely something that we're seeing a lot in certain markets in California. In terms of special populations, we profiled 3 case studies, 2 for seniors. One is an intergenerational co-housing model in Berkeley. Another is a scattered site senior housing and service delivery model in Brooklyn. And we also profiled in the report artist housing and how that gets built, the design requirements, how you finance it, and how to make it affordable for artists. The last one we profiled was this thing called an energy efficient rehab program. And so, there's a question here there's been multiple studies that have been thinking about how to encourage landlords to invest in capital improvements through the historic preservation, the seismic study, and then also the capital pass-through program. And so, in thinking about the increase in Costa-Hawkins, the impact of rent increases post-Costa-Hawkins, I think it's clear in some ways that landlords are really making money. And it's not clear, though, why they're not really investing in some of these major improvements. And so sometimes, in thinking through maybe like a mom-and-pop landlord, maybe they just don't have the know-how or the access to capital to kind of make these improvements. And so this profiles a case in Chicago where we have 2 nonprofits that have gotten together. One is a construction management firm, the other is a nonprofit bank. And together they kind of roll out a one-shop stop for building owners who are interested in making improvements. And so it's a really interesting case study that could be deployed in West Hollywood. And so in summary, all of these strategies kind of lay out and can impact and target households at different AMI levels. In addition, there's a little different levels of tenant education required for each of these solutions. For example, limited equity co-ops, co-housing, community land trusts typically require higher levels of tenant education and training. And then also the cost to deploy each of these programs varies. And so the local subsidies, can be more expensive for like an acquisition fund for at-risk buildings and the scattered site senior housing model, and more affordable for others. And so in closing, I wanted to open it up to any questions that you may have had in reading the case studies and for this presentation.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
I just have one quick question. So the energy sustainability, about 5 years ago, we recommended that to the housing department, Peter, and I know Elizabeth looked at that. And then a couple years ago, there was a sort of study that was started and abandoned. And do we have any sort of sense that there is a nonprofit and a construction management firm that we could get together to create this one-stop shop? Have you taken that sort of into consideration?
Right. I mean, that's really kind of a capacity issue. And so luckily in Chicago, they had these two nonprofits that were doing these special separate lines of work, and they got together to kind of team up. And so it's really an issue of finding the right organizations here that may have access to that expertise.
So that hasn't happened yet? You haven't reached out to anyone to do that?
It hasn't happened at this point. However, that's the action that we're looking for tonight, is to go ahead and explore that.
Is that one of the recommendations? Because I didn't see that.
Yeah, the recommendations are to expand on the 8 strategies that are in the report, and this is one of those strategies that was in the report itself. So we would go ahead and explore that, and if in fact there is a feasibility or if there's benefits, we would come back with a recommendation to the council.
Thank you. Lauren?
Thank you. First, I want to commend Jessica and BAE on a really great report. I actually read all 90 pages, and it was very exciting for me because, you know, we have put forth several initiatives like the TOPA initiative and the just housing, looking at new housing policies, and I think that this really did the report was thorough, and just my head was just going, this is so exciting. Okay, so now I know that everyone wants to get out by 9 o'clock, so I'll try to be fast. But I think that there is a real opportunity here to continue what Councilmember D'Amico was saying for nonprofits, both, you know, for something similar to the Community Land Trust, something similar to the Small Sites Program, and something, you know, a company that would be similar to the Energy Savers, and also to extend that out to earthquake retrofitting, because if that could be done simultaneously, that would be an incredible benefit to a small landlord who really doesn't know how to go about any of these things. So I think when we look at the energy saving, let's also look at the earthquake retrofit as part of that. I also wondered, would the first step for us possibly be then to look into the right of first refusal policy in order to get us one step closer to CLTs and limited equity co-ops?
Right, so yeah, I think that you're speaking to another item that the council has asked us to look at, and so part of the intent here would be to explore that policy, the tenant opportunity to purchase as part of and in combination with some of these other models with the shepherding of a nonprofit.
Because you need that in order to get to the CLT, you want to have
Correct.
that interest, and you want to know that the tenants are
We
interested.
did look at that, the tenant opportunity to purchase programs, and what we saw is that there is a lot of education needed to bring a tenant in to be a homeowner, and that there was also a real need to have a nonprofit and some other guidance that was shepherding the process. And so that's all the intent here, is to bring these different council initiatives and requests together and to look at them comprehensively and come back with a recommendation.
I think
Just to add to that, I think that it's possible to have the tenant right to purchase and the limited equity co-ops. Those go together very well. For the small sites acquisition, you could actually deploy that policy on its own without a tenant right to purchase, because that's just petitioning for nonprofits to buy, so long as you have, you know, city funding to put up for that kind of program. So I think for the small sites, you don't necessarily have to have a tenant right to purchase.
Great, and then, I mean, what I noticed was when you look at that high prices of new apartments don't necessarily, they're not necessarily caused by higher costs. That's what your graph showed. So I think that for us, one of the things that we should really be focusing on then is saving our buildings that already have units that are affordable. And these are the ways that we can do this with the CLT and with limited equity, to be able to if we move forward with those kind of programs, and the energy savers, and include earthquake retrofit into that. And then I honestly, and I know you in the report, I think you're a big fan of the artist housing. Peter, you kind of said, well, it doesn't really fit in West Hollywood. I would want you to be open-minded about that. I think that anywhere there's a building, you could consider artist work-live housing. So I don't want to lose that aspect of this report. And then the other thing I would just say is, really, the report was so excellent. I think that we should send this to our state representatives and the governor and say, look, this is what we need is money to do these programs. And instead of piling on more and more legislation on us when we haven't even figured out the last 15 from last year, how about some funding for innovative programs like this? And send them this report, Peter, and say, look, we're doing our part here. Let's try to be innovative at the state level.
Thank you. Other comments? Lindsay? John? I have comments, and I appreciate all the time and effort you put into this, but I'm actually, as the conversation's going, I'm getting more and more frustrated and more angry about the report. And the reason I am is because it doesn't appear that, and I'm not saying this is your fault, but it doesn't appear that there was any effort on the part of the city to give you information about what we've already explored. The whole idea of limited equity co-ops, that's not a new idea. And that's not the first time we've considered it in the city of West Hollywood. So your report is great, sort of academic type report. But in terms of applicability to West Hollywood, we have previously considered that, and we've previously analyze whether it would work in the city of West Hollywood. You focused on the high levels of tenant education that would be required, but it's not only that. If I'm a tenant and I can scrape together $50,000 to buy a unit, why am I going to buy one that will then be income restricted when I have to sell it? Most tenants, if they are able to buy a unit, they don't want that unit to be restricted. They want to profit like every other homeowner. So that was part of the limitation. And we actually did pro formas and explored individual buildings to see if this was something that would really work in the city of West Hollywood. The idea of having nonprofits purchase land for development, we have a nonprofit. We actually have multiple nonprofits that have built affordable housing in the city of West Hollywood. So I felt there was a little bit of disconnect between what is a great academic report and the housing issues that we have right here in West Hollywood and the feasibility of some of these recommendations. Having said that, there are some certain things that I think we can do, and Lauren mentioned one of them, and that is buying existing buildings and trying to preserve the housing there. Many of the buildings that are going to have to go through earthquake retrofitting, the current owners may not want to go through that. They may not have the expertise. They may be willing to sell, and those units often are our affordable units in the rental housing stock. So I would really prefer us looking at that. I've talked to some nonprofits about that, and their take on it is, well, it's expensive, but it's less expensive than building new units ground up. So we should be exploring that. The idea of micro units, we've had conversations about that. I would be open to having, I don't want to see buildings with all micro units, but having some micro units that are then controlled or maybe in addition to our ordinary inclusionary rules. New developments over a certain size get one micro unit, no parking required, but they have to deed restrict it to somebody who is homeless or at risk of homelessness. The other frustration, the energy initiative, we have a solar initiative. That's not completely energy efficient, but that's one of the initiatives. We do have consultants. So I kind of feel like there was no connection to the work that's already being done in the city, not just for affordable properties, but for all property owners. Having said that, I do think we need to move forward with this, and I'll support moving forward and continuing to explore, but I really feel that there needs to be better work in terms of what actually will work in West Hollywood. So I see there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Nope. All right, we can go ahead and vote. All right, thank you. Thank you for that report. And I think we have one other item, 5B. This will be a lengthy, detailed conversation with multiple public hearings. We need to appoint a delegate and voting delegate for the Southern California Association of Governments. Who is planning on attending May 3rd and 4th?
I will not be attending.
You will not be attending. Nothing would get me to go to the SCAG meeting. Are you going, or were you planning on going?
I can go if nobody else is. I will try. I was considering it.
Okay, so can we appoint Lindsay and then Lauren? Is that, who's more definite?
It's on my calendar.
Okay, it's on your calendar?
It's on mine to not go.
Okay, it's on your calendar with dots. So Lindsay, and then Lauren as the alternate. Everyone comfortable with that? Yes. By consensus of the council. And then we do have some additional public speakers. I apologize that we didn't get to all of you at the beginning. And Yvonne is going to pull up the names. Eric John Schmidt, thank you for your patience, to be followed by Lynn, etc.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Eric John Schmidt. I am a resident of West Hollywood. I've been here 14 years, but I've been in Los Angeles for about 20 years. I live on the east side, so I know all the problems that are going on down there. I live at the Avalon. I'm here tonight to announce that I'm going to run for City Council in 2019. I have filed the paperwork with the city clerk, and in my campaign, I will not ask for any campaign donation. And as a city council member, I will be available to residents during normal business hours. I'm looking forward to bringing new energy to the council and working for the residents of West Hollywood. And my name again is Eric John Schmidt, without an H, J-O-N. And my Facebook page for my campaign is Eric John Schmidt for WeHo, all capitals, W-E-H-O. And I will be in the lobby with the information packets if anybody wants them.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Best of luck to you. Lynn, etc., to be followed by L. Farmer.
Lynn, etc., West Hollywood. I went dancing Saturday night. I don't even slightly feel like being here tonight. I wonder how many city employees go camping, travel, or celebrate on a weekend. Who likes to work 24/7 on a Monday? In my time attending council meetings, one of the council members said, "We've made mistakes." This is an over 30-year mistake. Funny thing about how mistakes can become a rut. The interesting thing about a rut, even a 30-year rut, is just changing the path can get one out of the rut. I'm hoping for a trial period of a year you can try a new path, council meetings on Wednesday or Thursday. It's a dereliction of your duty as an elected public servant to discriminate against people who work on the weekend, to not facilitate full participation. Monday is farmers market. To get ready to come here and just listen to the meetings, my day goes by and all of a sudden it's time to get here. You have farmers market on Monday and then you have employees getting everything ready to come here and try and explain. And I have to tell you something. I am very observant and I notice things about people. It's what I do. Everyone on this dais I've seen look like the cat dragged in.
Well, thank you for that compliment. L. Farmer, to be followed by Daniel Wilson. L. Farmer, Danielle Wilson, David Nash, I think, has left, and Richard Giesbrecht, I think he spoke at the beginning. All right, so if there are no other council comments, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.